in the year 1055. We died.
And ever since,
Our eyes.
we've been cursed.
We are condemned to witness every horror, every abomination of human and supernatural history.
Cannot close, and to narrate it without rest for all eternity.
We are the MogDark Brothers, and this is the curse you won't be able to stop listening to. Daniel, tell me, have you ever felt like something is watching you even when you're alone? I don't mean a demonic presence, I'm talking about something worse. Something human. Something that doesn't need to hide because you see it every day, and yet you don't understand it.
Are you talking about yourself again, Charles? Because if so, let me tell you, not even hell has as much vanity as you. Ha. But yes, sometimes I do feel that, like the past walking along the edges of my shadow, and every so often it brushes against my back with the dirty nails of memory.
Ku. It was in a nameless city, where fear walked ahead of the soldiers. There, they didn't speak of witches. They whispered about them, like someone trying to cover an ulcer with petals. Before the Inquisition even had a name, women were already burning for looking at the moon with eyes too wide, and it all started not with the devil, but with a prayer. A cursed prayer.
Ah, that city. I remember the smell, not of sulfur, but of dampness, torch grease, and the secrets simmering inside the convent walls. They said the evil was out there, Charles, but they never looked at the altar. They didn't look at the priest. They didn't look at the man.
Because the real demon doesn't howl. He signs decrees and wears white robes.
And that's how it began. A city where prayers were said out of fear, where children were born with the names of saints, but the marks of plague, where the eyes that judged the most were the ones that confessed the least.
And the first fire wasn't lit by Satan. It was lit by the Archbishop. But of course, the people only saw a flame and shouted, "Witch."
And so, Charles, the story begins, not with the howl of a beast. It wasn't the devil. It was man.
When the enemy comes from afar, you build walls. But what if the enemy already sleeps under your own roof? What do you do when the monster wears a cassock and preaches on Sundays?
In Orleans, it wasn't a war of swords. It was a war of whispers. The accused, clergymen, not thieves, not pagans, priests, reverends of the very temple, men of God who, according to rumors, prayed with blood and coupled with demons.
What was the prayer, Daniel? In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Abyss.
They spoke of Gnostic rituals, but not the kind that seek wisdom. We're talking about denials of Christ, profaned sacraments, dark altars where candles burned upside down. Witnesses claimed they heard chants in tongues that made the statues weep. Did they worship Lucifer? Maybe. Did they deny the cross? Could be. Were they guilty? Innocent? Who cares? The people believed, and that was enough.
The walls were listening. The marble of the temple creaked at night, and those who knew too much vanished without an echo. No confession. You know what's the worst part? Even if it was all a lie, that La had faith. And when faith is twisted, it can burn more than any fire from hell.
Orleans didn't sleep. Orleans prayed, but not for redemption. It prayed not to be next. The infamous decree. The condemnation did not come from heaven, it came from the throne. King Robert II, known as the Pious, was the one who signed the decree, and with a single word, he ordered that the canons be reduced to ashes.
The reason? Heresy, dark rituals, sexual deviations, rejection of the sacraments, and worst of all, denying the soul of Christ in the Eucharist.
That was unforgivable.
But beyond doctrine there was fear. Fear of what they represented. Priests who challenged the structure. Men in cassocks who spoke of two gods. One of light and one of darkness. And some said they served the latter.
The church knew, and the king too. If they let that seed grow, the throne and the altar would burn from within.
So they decided to burn them first, so no one else would dare. So the people would know who rules, and so the faith would remain pure.
The execution was public, organized, like a mass. The bishop officiated. The nobles watched from their balconies, and the people applauded.
The plaza became an altar, the bodies an offering, the fire a sacrament, and the pain a message.
They say that before dying, one of the canons laughed as if he knew something no one else understood. And his last words were, "They burn us now, but our shadows will keep praying inside their temples."
The day without Sun Orleans, year 1022, hell became ritual. No one will remember the exact date, but everyone will remember the smoke, black, thick, covering the sky as if God had left.
There were 11 men in cassocks, 11 traitors to the faith, they said. But that morning, they were just 11 trembling bodies before a crowd.
Not even the sun came out, and the birds didn't sing. The children stared without blinking.
One by one, they were tied to wooden stakes. The straw was soaked with wine. Yes, wine, like in the Last Supper. A supper without bread, only fire.
There was no silence, only screams. One screamed the name of Christ, another spat at the sky. One more sang in Latin, while his skin fell like melting wax.
I laughed, but not from pleasure. I laughed because I understood the punishment wasn't for them. It was for all of us, to remind us that no one is safe from faith when faith is afraid. The smoke rose like cursed incense, the flames danced like demonic monks, and the icons on the stone walls wept.
It was a day without sun, without compassion, without soul, and yet they called it divine justice.
But we know the truth. That day, hell wasn't below. It was here, in Orleans, dressed as a bishop, holding a cross and a torch.
The aftermath. Silence. When the smoke left scars, Orleans never breathed the same again. The fire died out, the bodies turned to dust, but the smoke remained, invisible, slow, clinging to the walls and to our consciences.
The churches filled up, more candles, more prayers, more confessions, but no one spoke of the day without sun. They just lowered their gaze, as if guilt chased them from within.
The market reopened. Children ran again through the square, but something floated in the air, an echo, a presence, as if the scream still bounced off the stones.
The bells sound the same, but now they hurt. Every Sunday feels like penance, every sermon a warning, as if God were waiting for someone to repent.
The crosses on the hill are gone, only scorched earth remains. And yet, every night, some swear they see shadows there, praying, weeping, burning again.
Sometimes I wonder if it wasn't us, the ones who were condemned, the ones who applauded, the ones who watched, the ones who stayed silent.
The smoke never left. We just learned not to see it.
And Orleans was never sacred again. Only more obedient, more silent, more broken.
Sometimes, hell doesn't begin when you die. It begins when no one wants to remember you were ever alive. The years passed, but their names crumbled like ashes. No statues, no tombstones, only black earth and silence.
The church won. The throne remained untouched. But on cold nights, some say the wind carries their voices. They don't pray. They don't curse. They only ask, why?
The dungeon stones are still there. If you get close, if you press your ear to them, you can hear something. A lament, a muted chant, a name you can't quite understand.
They weren't saints. There were no miracles. But they were living fire, pure thought. And that's why they died.
Sometimes I think it's not us who remember them. It's them who don't forget us.
The dead's revenge. The nameless martyrs. Sometimes hell doesn't begin when you close your eyes. It starts much earlier. When the world decides you don't deserve to be remembered, not as a hero, not as a monster, just forgotten, as if you never even breathed.
Centuries passed, and their names turned to dust. No cross, no date, no sigh carved in stone, and they were swallowed by time. as if the earth itself spat them out in silence. The church remained standing, the throne remained high, but beneath the foundations, something shattered forever.
They were called heretics, burned like beasts, locked away like plagues. And yet, on moonless nights, when the cold seeps into your bones, the wind carries their voices, they don't cry, they don't pray, they don't scream for revenge. They just ask, why? They had no altars, no miracles, no pilgrims, but they burned within, with ideals, with questions, with dreams too big for the world. And because of that, they were condemned.
They weren't saints. They were human, all too human. They thought, they doubted, they spoke. And power doesn't tolerate free voices. It called them plague, it called them threat, and it snuffed them out.
But they were never fully extinguished. They remained floating in the crack between history and consciousness. They're not ghosts. They're not shadows. They're unanswered questions, embers still burning in the coldest corners of memory.
Sometimes I think it's not us who remember them. It's them who won't let us forget. Every time someone questions, every time someone dares to think differently, they return as a warning, as a whisper, as a broken promise.
They didn't ask to be martyrs. They only wanted to exist with dignity. But forgetfulness is cruel, and silence is a punishment worse than fire. And still, they remain, where no one sees them, where few can feel them, but where they've always been, waiting. The first fire, the flame that taught how to burn. This was the beginning, not the bloodiest, not the loudest, but yes, the first. The first time Europe looked at fire and called it justice. The first time smoke carried with it an idea. This is how the world is purified.
It wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson, a message written in human flesh, a warning that said, this is what happens when you think. This is what happens when you doubt. And everyone learned. The kings, the clergy, the people. They learned that fire could become law.
They called it heresy. They disguised it as salvation. But what burned weren't sins. They were bodies. They were ideas. They were possible futures.
And you know what was the cruelest part? It wasn't the pyre. It was the silence afterward. No one screamed. No one wrote. No one wept aloud. Because fear had done its job.
Charles and I have seen it many times. So many we no longer remember the names. Only the pattern. A pattern that always begins the same, with a small spark, a suspicion, a question, and ends with smoke in the sky and ashes where someone once stood.
But this was the first time fire stopped being a tool and became a doctrine. It no longer just killed. It converted. It shaped. It bent knees.
This wasn't the last pyre, nor the worst, but it was the one that taught how to do it, the one that showed the world that fire could have a pulpit, and from that pulpit, it could preach fear.
They didn't die for blasphemy. They died for thinking, for speaking, for refusing to kneel before fear dressed as a cross.
The fire didn't come from hell. It came from praying hands, from temples and from thrones.
It wasn't monsters who lit the pyres, it was men in white robes with Bibles in hand.
And when faith learns to kill, even God closes his eyes.
If you've listened this far, it wasn't by chance. This isn't a story about history. This is about what still burns, even when there's no fire.
Remember this, the pyres were extinguished, but the silence, it still screams.
Don't believe everything that shines in churches. Not everything that burns is from the devil. Sometimes, faith smells more like burned flesh than incense.
If you feel a chill tonight, it's not the wind, it's the memory of those who were never forgotten.